Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Wherever you are in the world, welcome to BWTM Online. We have another special guest all the way from Dallas, Texas, in America. We have Bobbi Mallory. John. Bobbi, how are you doing?
I'm doing wonderful today. How are you?
I am very well, and thank you so much for coming to our headquarters at BWTM to talk about a very important subject.
Okay, I'm glad to have me.
Thank you. Let's talk about a little bit about you first before we get into our main subject. So tell us a little bit about you.
Well, as you stated, I do live in Dallas, Texas, and I am from America, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I am. My background is in education, and I did that for the last several years.
Mm-hmm.
But unfortunately, due to an illness that I had to retire early.
So we're talking about multiple sclerosis, correct?
Correct. I do live with multiple sclerosis.
So when did you first know about the condition?
Well, when I was pregnant with my daughter in 2000, I had some symptoms, but they told me it was pregnancy related. And when I delivered my daughter, the symptoms did go away. So I assumed they knew what they were talking about. 3 years later, the same symptoms came back, and I went to my doctor, and I said, okay, I'm having these symptoms again, and I'm not pregnant, so what is this? I was graduating with my master's in education at that time, and one of the things about MS, it is stress triggered. And so I was graduating, getting back into the work field, and in addition, my mother was fighting for her life with breast cancer. So those are some very, very serious things going on in my life, which in turn triggered the MS to activate again.
So when you talk about symptoms, what are these symptoms that you had?
Well, the first symptom that I had, and I can't remember what it's called, it starts with an L, is where I would look down and I would feel these sensations going down my spine and into my arms. And then I'll look back up and it'll go away. But it happened continuously. Well, I learned later on that that was a very indication that I had probably had MS. And so 3 years later, after 2000, those same symptoms came back, but only this time they came back with a vengeance. I went to pick up my daughter and I couldn't move my arm. And so I'm looking at my arm like, okay, why aren't you moving? And it wouldn't move, and then it just progressively got worse.
So when you were first told about multiple sclerosis, was it something that you knew about beforehand, or was it researched, or was it something that caught you by surprise?
Well, I had heard the term multiple sclerosis, but I never had a reason to look it up to see what it was. One of my family members was diagnosed with MS, but we never talked about it. He didn't talk about it, so we never talked about it. I knew Richard Pryor had MS, and Richard Pryor didn't look too good to me. So when they told me I had MS, I was very nervous and scared. And at the time, I had a 3-year-old daughter, and she needed her mother. And I wanted to be around and watch her grow up and eventually graduate from high school and get married and have a family.
So Richard Pryor obviously is from Peoria, Illinois, which...
Yes, Richard Pryor was born and raised in Peoria, Illinois. So all of us that was raised in Illinois as well knew Richard Pryor. Now, he was several years older than I am, but we all know Richard Pryor because he's talked about in Peoria.
So obviously when you saw the images of Richard Pryor, that triggered off, oh my God, I don't want to end up like that. That could be me.
Yes, that's exactly what I thought. At the time when I was diagnosed with Richard Pryor was in a wheelchair. Not saying that being in a wheelchair was bad, but not only was he in a wheelchair, and he just didn't look very good to me.
But did you not take that into consideration of his lifestyle, the way he was living his life? Richard Pryor, smoking and drinking and boozing and gambling and womanizing.
At the time, I didn't think about that. All I know is MS and Richard Pryor, and it didn't look good to me.
Oh dear.
Now, however, when I was nervous and I would say that, and that's what brought to my attention, is that, you guys live a very different life, and so I was told I shouldn't have to worry to that extent that I might be, because Richard Pryor MS probably was triggered by some of the other things he did. I'm not sure of that, but that's what was told to me. But at the time when I heard MS, all I heard was MS and saw Richard Pryor.
So talk to me about the process, if you can. The doctor sits you down, and says, well, this is what the situation is?
Well, when I went to my doctor, when those symptoms came back, reappeared, I told her that I had a pinched nerve. And I told her all of my symptoms. She said, well, okay, I want you to go get an MRI. And I said, okay, let's fix this because I got to get back into the work field. And so I went and had an MRI. And then I received a call, and I was driving, and they said, Bobbi, we need you to go get a second MRI, and we need you to see a neurologist. I said, what are you thinking? And she said, we don't know. I said, oh, you know something. Just tell me what you're thinking. And she said, we think you have MS. We don't know for sure, but we think you have MS. And so I had to go get the second MRI. Then I had to go to a neurologist. And so I went to that neurologist, and based off the findings of what he saw on both my MRIs, he said, I don't have to do any further testing. You have MS. He was very harsh and not very sympathetic, and not very, and I'm sure it's because he deals with this on a daily basis.
So you've been desensitized.
Very. And so he just told me the medicine I was going to be on. Now, what I know now is I should have told him which medicine I want to try. But at the time, I didn't know. I was confused. I was scared. And so he just told me a medicine that he wanted me to, that I was going to get on. And so it was called Rebif. And what I had to do with Rebif, 3 times a week, every other day, I had to give myself a shot. Well, I was on Rebif for about maybe 6-7 months. I'm not sure. I can't recall. Because let me go back a little bit. I was diagnosed with MS in 2004. And it is 2018 now. So I've been living with it for a long time. And one of the research that I heard when I was diagnosed, that by year 10, that I will probably be using some type of device to help me walk. I am still walking independently. Do I walk slower? Yes. And have I fallen? Yes, I have. But anyway, let me move forward. Where was I at?
We're talking about the doctor and after taking the medication by yourself, putting the shots.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm listening.
Okay. So after I was on Rebif for several months, I would fall and bump into walls, and I called my doctor. I said, something's wrong. Something's not right. I feel like I'm getting worse, and if I'm on medication, I feel like I'm getting worse. And so I had to go back and get another MRI, and I was called and told that medicine's not working. I have 7 new lesions, and while you're on medication, they do not want to see any new lesions. Sometimes they get 1 to 2, but they don't want to see more than that. And I got 7. And so they told me I need to get I have a very aggressive form of MS, and I need to get on some stronger medicine. So I got on something called Tysabri. And Tysabri is where I had to go to the hospital every 4 weeks, and they gave it to me intravenously. And so I did that for 5.5 years. Now, Tysabri can cause death. It can cause a brain infection called PML. I can't recall what PML stands for. It's a big, long words. But basically, it's a brain infection that could either kill you or severely disable you. But for me, my risk of progressing with the MS as I was doing, and my risk of potentially getting PML, was the risk of progressing was more fearful for me. And so I opted to get on the Tysabri. And so I was on Tysabri for 5.5 years, and it was helping as far as my physical part of the condition. I suffer more cognitive issues. And so I told my doctor, okay, that the Tysabri is helping me, and I do like being on it, even though they learned that being something called JC virus positive, which is, it's not uncommon for the most person in the world to have that, because it's almost like a common cold. However, being JC virus and being on Tysabri raises my risk of developing PML. And so I told my doctor, it's helping me physically, but I need something that's going to help me cognitively, because what good is it for me to be able to walk, but I can't think? And so we decided to try a pill. But I really think my doctor was really kind of trying to get me off the Tysabri because of the risk factor that I was having with it. So I got on a pill called Gilenia. And I was on Gilenia for, I believe, 4 years. And that was a pill that I took once a day, which I loved because, I didn't have to go to the hospital any longer. I didn't have to get things put in my veins. I didn't have to do a lot of the sticking myself and getting bruises all over my legs from the shots. I just took a pill.
Wow.
However, it didn't help my cognitive any better than the Tysabri. And one of the risks I was going to face was I potentially could lose some of my physical. But I didn't, and I was okay with the Gelane. But after being on it for the amount of years that I was on, which was 3 or 4 years, I believe it was 4 years, though, to be honest with you, my neurologist noticed that I was stumbling a little bit more. And so he said he believes I need to change my medicine again. So then I was on something called Lemtrada.
Okay.
And what that medicine is supposed to do is supposed to stop the progression of the condition. I don't like to say disease. Many people say disease, but I don't like it because disease make me think it's contagious. You cannot catch MS. And so I like to say condition. And so that happened just a year ago. Okay. And you go to the hospital and get it infused for 1 week. And I'm not supposed to get anything else until next year, a year later, which is coming up this October. And it's supposed to stop the progression of the disease. They won't say I'm healed, but it's supposed to stop the progression of the disease as to where it's at. It's out to say if it's working. One of the things I have noticed, I have fallen 8 times this year. And that's more than I've fallen in all the years I've been diagnosed with MS. I feel okay, but I'm not sure, and the MRI will tell. So once I have to get my MRI again, if I have new lesions or if any of them are activated, then we'll know that the medicine is not working for me.
Okay. So when you first found out about the multiple sclerosis, how were family with it?
Repeat that again?
When you first discovered of the condition,
correct,
how did family respond to you with it?
Actually, I was married at the time, and my husband was very supportive. We were all scared. We're both scared, I should say. My daughter was too young to understand what was going on. But he was very supportive. We were scared because we didn't know much about it, and I didn't tell my mom immediately because my mom was still fighting the breast cancer that she was diagnosed with. So I didn't tell her immediately. I did reach out to my cousin that had MS, and so I went to him, and he actually gave me loads of good information, a really good book, and which helped me, and it eased my my fear a little bit, talking to someone I knew that was living with it. And so he spoke with me, my ex-husband now, and we read, we researched. We went to a lot of programs that educate us. It was from the drug companies, the different drug companies, because MS for years did not have any medication. The only thing they would give you steroids.
Okay.
That's all they would do.
What would the steroids do?
The steroids would stop the flare, but it causes a whole lot of other issues. But it wouldn't stop the flare for long all the time. Sometimes it would. Depends on your stress level. One of the things that is very important for people living with multiple sclerosis is to keep their stress level down. So if something is upsetting them, something is stressing them out, remove that from their life if they can, because stress triggers the condition to get worse.
So how do you find living with it now in 2018?
Well, 2018, my motto is I have MS. MS does not have me. It does not control me. It does not stop me from living. It has interfered with my ability to work. However, I'm going to keep living because I have one life and there is no do-overs.
So how have you adjusted your lifestyle now because of MS?
It is an adjustment. I can't live how I used to live. Not that I was living bad, but I can't just do a whole lot because walking too long, I'm exhausted. Heat, I am horrible in heat. Heat is one of the triggers as well. When you get really hot with MS, you potentially can fall and not be able to walk. I used to love to take hot baths and hot showers. I can't do that anymore. And I typically don't take a bath unless someone is at the house with me. Because one of the things that could happen if I get the water too hot, I could potentially drown. So I typically do not take baths if I don't have someone in the house.
Wow. how does that affect you interacting with other people? On a personal level, on an intimate level. Is there anything you have to do differently, or do you just still move the same way?
One of the things that I had a hard time with, and I wasn't sure, once I end up getting a divorce, and we're still friends. We are co-parenting our daughter, but I wasn't sure if I would tell any new potential dates that I had this. But then I decided that I'm going to tell it, because I would rather, if they can't deal with this, I would rather for them to go in the beginning, rather than us building something. Then I have to say, okay, I have this debilitating condition, and then they feel like they can't take it, so they'll leave. I'd rather for someone to tell me up front, okay, I can't handle it, and I'm okay with that. So I'm very open with the condition. Any of my friends, they're very much aware, and sometimes they have to realize I'm not the old Bobbi that they knew.
So how do you break that down to somebody who's known you, Bobbi before, to Bobbi now?
Well, I had an incident where I went back to my home, and I couldn't remember where I was going, and because that's one of the problems with MS. You sometimes, if you have cognitive issues, you might forget something that you've known. And so I had a friend that grew up with me from the time I was in 3rd grade, and I said, "Which way do I go?" She said, "Oh, you know which way. You know here. Just don't get new on me." And I said, and I stopped. I said, "Listen, I'm not working because I don't want to work. I'm not working because I have a problem and I have a condition. And so if I ask you something, I just need you to answer the question." And at that point, it got quiet, and I didn't have to have that conversation with her again.
Wow. I have something called chronic fatigue syndrome, which is not the same, not comparable. But for 7 years it was internal, so people couldn't see the external effects. If you break a leg, people say, "Oh, you broke your leg, you broke your arm." But I find that when it's something internal, people kind of almost ignore you and almost feel as if either you're lazy, or you don't want to do something, or you're making excuses. How do you deal with that? How did you deal with that at first when you were diagnosed with something that a lot of people don't know about?
Well, I still have that problem, because a lot of the questions people say, "You don't look sick."
You see?
And the worst thing to me is when you tell somebody that has a debilitating condition, "You don't look sick." They don't know what's internally going on. For me, my brain is constantly working, and I think that's what makes me exhausted. Is if your brain never gets a rest, then it's going to tire the body out. For me to just step off of a curb is difficult because I have to think, leg move, and then once it moves, don't fall. So I'm constantly thinking. I'm constantly telling my body things to do, and so my brain is constantly working. But it's very difficult and hurtful when people, because they don't see the disability, because I'm not using a cane, I'm not using a walker, I'm not using a wheelchair 100% of the time, and I'm not even using that stuff 10% of the time. But just because you can't see this disability does not mean it doesn't exist, and that's very frustrating. But I'm a very vocal person, and I don't have a problem with telling somebody if they are offending me in any way. I don't have a problem with saying that. And so I'm very vocal.
You see, what hurts most is when you tell them the situation and they look at you and go, "Oh, well, it can't be that bad. You're not walking with a cane. You're not in a wheelchair. I know people who've got MS and they're in wheelchairs and they've got a cane. You must be fine. You're okay."
I've had that happen to me, and I tell them, until they walk my shoes, you can't tell me what I'm feeling and what's going on with me. And I do not have and then if someone I don't have to talk to you. I do not have to talk to someone who wants to judge me because of something they don't know about, or for something they can't see.
Isn't it their ignorance?
Exactly, and that's exactly what it is. And the best thing they can do, and one of the things I tell anybody that I meet new or I have known, is educate yourself. If you want to know what I'm dealing with and what I'm feeling, educate yourself. I've had several friends go to a lot of those programs that I said I went to. I had lots of friends and family members that would go so they can learn about this, so that they could be my support system. When I had to leave my job and go out on disability, I had friends that come and help me fill out the paperwork. I couldn't formulate what I want to say, so I would tell her how I'm feeling and what's going on, and she would help me formulate the words. So I have a good support system. Even though I live in Texas now, I still have a good support system of friends that live back in Illinois. I've made some in Texas. I have a good support system that helped me go through this condition that I'm dealing with.
What would be your advice to people who A, find out about the condition, and B, living with it?
The best thing I can tell anybody that is newly diagnosed with multiple sclerosis is to get involved and research the condition. Learn as much as you can about it so you can know the triggers. For me, I had to learn as much as I could about this condition because I wanted to be around and be healthy for as long as possible so I can watch my daughter grow up. When I was diagnosed, my daughter was 3 years old. My daughter is 18 and she'll be starting her senior year in high school. And God willing, I will be able to watch her walk across that stage.
Is there anything else you'd like to say before we finish, Bobbi?
Just one of the things I think about MS is, let me look at this because I want the audience to see this.
Okay.
Is if you're diagnosed with anything, whether it's MS or fibromyalgia or chronic fatigue syndrome, lupus, any other debilitating autoimmune disease conditions, tell yourself and believe it that you have this condition. This condition does not have you. And that's the best thing the advice I can get everybody, anybody. Do not let these conditions define who you are. Will your life change? Yes, probably will. But just because your life changed doesn't mean it has to stop.
Bobbi, thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
This has been Bobbi Mallory John with BWTM Online. We're out. Take care.